Welcome, everybody. My name is Chris Ortolano, and I'm the team lead at Sailstack, and I'm delighted to be hosting Nadja Gausi and Dave Gearhart, both marketing leaders and also buyers for their respective organizations, Prezi and Drift. Together, we'll be exploring what works for them when they have B2B sales conversations. Before we get started, I'd just like to introduce that sales conversations take place in many ways, at live events, social media, live chats, and also with more than one person simultaneously. In the sales development prospecting community, this is known as multi-threading, and it's where we'll be starting our conversation. But before we dive into that, let's just remember that what's critical to keep top of mind is sort of the fundamentals of what the buyer's journey is really like, and what's important when we present to multiple stakeholders in the room for a high-value, high-stakes conversation. Nadja, it's great to see you on the call today. Where are you dialing in from?
I'm dialing in from San Francisco.
Fantastic. Nadja Gausi, VP of Marketing at Prezi, you've had an amazing career. Can you give us just a little bit of backstory about what you did before and what you're currently doing at Prezi today?
Sure, yeah. I came up through the ranks. I started in management consulting, but kind of moved to marketing pretty quickly when I realized all the creativity, fun, and analytics were moving that direction. I've had roles that range from the product side all the way through to brand. I've been at two companies that went public, very different areas in software. And I've been at Prezi now for over 2 years. I love it that I have a pretty wide range in terms of my team here. We have brand, product marketing, creative, demand gen, ops, international. It's a good sized team and a very different kind of scenario in that we as a company, we're a freemium company. We're also B2C2B, which means that the dimensions of what we have to marry up sort of span different kinds of marketing practices that can be very complex sometimes, but very exciting because the market reach of what we do with our product is so wide. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
And most recently, Prezi published the 2018 State of Attention report. Can you cast a little light on that?
Sure. So several years ago, there was a research report that was put out into the marketplace that said you have the attention span of a goldfish, and just in terms of the actual quantification, that's about 8 to 9 seconds. So we at Prezi didn't add up to us. You know, we know that people are engaging with different kinds of formats. They're, you know, if you have the attention span of a goldfish, how can you watch a 2-hour movie about a fish, which is called Nemo, because you choose to engage with that. So we wanted to understand the premise of this and to go into like, is this true? What's happened with your attention span and what can you do about it? And we did it across different demographic profiles. And we really looked at like, what are some of the challenges in terms of attention is kind of the new currency, basically all the marketing tools that are out there that can distract you. How do you engage? How do you sort of keep people's attention? So it's a great report. I'll be referencing some of this as we talk about it today. But net, I'll go to the spoiler alert. You're not a goldfish, and we'll explain why.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nadja. Dave, good morning. Good afternoon. Where are you dialing in from today?
I'm at the Drift Worldwide headquarters here in Boston, Massachusetts. It's the afternoon. It's about 30 degrees out, and I'm happy to be here.
I don't know whether to refer to you as the VP of Marketing or as the newest Drift account executive.
I'm a sales guy. I'm definitely a sales guy. When I did that, all the reps wanted to know, well, what's your quota? I said, well, take the whole revenue goal for the year, and that's actually what it is because I run the marketing team. So it's nice to help out. But yeah, I just did a challenge where I did 30 demos in 30 days, just to get a little bit closer to the sales side because I hadn't done a good job of keeping up over there. Lead the marketing team at Drift, which is product marketing, brand, creative, demand gen, everything. And I think truly I'm finally now ready to embrace it. I'm a marketing nerd and I love marketing. I love talking about marketing. And so I'm happy to do this.
And Nadja was referencing attention, and Drift is kind of capturing attention in a new way and maybe coining a new term, the CQL. Could you just shed a little light on that?
Yeah, so basically we came up with a new term for defining how leads come in, because what we noticed is all these people would come in via drift and they would say, I'm ready to buy right now, or I'd like a demo right now. And marketers would just be like thrown off because how does that fit in my funnel? And we got too caught up in the marketing attribution game, as opposed to like somebody just walked into your store and said, hi there, I'd like you to show me your product. But because our marketing automation stacks weren't built to correctly quantify that, we discounted it. We threw it out. When in reality, we've seen that we call them now CQLs, conversation qualified leads, because the way that the lead actually gets qualified is inside of a conversation, and that can either happen via a human or a bot. And so I'll give you one example on the human side of things. A lot of our sales reps, they have the Drift mobile app on their phone, and they go at night and they're watching Netflix or whatever, sitting on the couch, and they pull up the app, and somebody came in and said, I was going to buy Drift, but it looks like you don't integrate with Slack. And one of our reps, that was a named account in his name, hops in and says, whoa, no, wait a second. We do. Can I explain? And they ended up having a 30-minute conversation. I saw the whole transcript because it goes into Salesforce, and the deal closed. And I'm like, now that is exactly why this exists, because how do you have that if it's a form? You don't, because you can't actually have a conversation. And so we call them conversation qualified leads. So marketers have a way to track them. And we're starting to now educate more of the market on where these fit, how to think about them, and really just, we've lived this in our own funnel firsthand, where the people that come in via chat convert into opportunities at about 4 to 5 times the rate of any other source, because the intent is highest.
Absolutely. So this is going to be the kind of the focus of conversations, and do they in fact lead to better discovery? Before we dive into that with our guests here, I just want to give a shout out to our panel moderators, Arwen Heredia, President Content Marketing Manager, and Jeremy Boudinay, marketing partner at Boudinay Media, and also to our audience. We have a bunch of folks from around the world, and in particular, folks from New York City. I'd like to give a shout out to Greg Rosner with Pitch Kitchen. He'll be joining us a little bit later in the live conversation. Before we dive into some of the fundamentals and provide some key takeaways for our audience, I'd like to just pop up an audience poll here. Jeremy, if you wouldn't mind, pop up the poll. We want to ask a critical question, which is, audience, what's critical for you to have more engaging conversations? As I was saying to Nadja earlier, the concept of a conversation is often lost in a B2B context because it turns into like a one-way monologue. And typically it's very data-driven with a lot of charts and graphs, facts and figures. And some people are now calling that a data ambush, if you will. Dave, I know you're a buyer. Nadja is also. And we know that there can be some kind of demo fatigue associated with this ambush. And I think it's important to be able to step back, let the buyers drive the conversation a little bit, and start to learn what their needs are while you're engaging with some kind of discovery process. Let's give the audience just another minute or so to answer these questions so we can start to tailor the conversation a little bit more. Jeremy, are you about ready to close the poll? Jeremy's listening in. And let's see what our audience has to say. What's critical for them? Engaging in real time and listening for the buyer's story. Fabulous. Okay. Nadja, any thoughts on the audience response there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the reality is, and I think I was talking about this earlier with you, Chris, is that, it's that 70-30 rule. 70% of the research is already done by the time they choose to engage with you. The job of the vendors at this point, or the service providers, is to provide that 30% that they don't know, right? And to be very respectful of the fact they've done their research and they have specific things that they want to delve into with you. Now, the reality is you need to also adapt to the types of questions they have. You let them drive, because by engaging, you're not talking at your audience, you're talking with your audience. It's a fundamental shift. It changes that whole paradigm from being presenter-driven to responding to your audience. It's being audience-driven. We think a lot about that, and we know that, if you can reduce this whole difference in terms of jumping to the information of what they want to know and not losing your audience, that builds confidence and trust, and that's really what sales is about. So I think there's a fundamental shift that has to happen. We call it conversational storytelling. That doesn't mean you don't have your strong visuals, your narrative, your dialogue, all the things that capture and engage your audience and keep their attention. But at the same time, you need to be super mindful of what people want to accomplish with the limited time they have. So I think for people live, for people virtual, no matter how you set that up, you've got to be super responsive to that. And that's kind of how we look at it.
Absolutely. So that's kind of leading into our next topic, which is the notion of speed to lead. Before we do that, though, I just want to define a term which is very common for some in the prospecting and sales community. It's called multi-threaded conversations. And it's a reference to speaking to multiple stakeholders simultaneously. And Dave, as you mentioned earlier, that happens in multiple ways. It can happen in a live chat. It could happen at a live event, obviously email and social. And so it's important for us to have some fundamentals, if you will, that drive these conversations in a very complex, dynamic way. Dave, let's turn to you and talk about this concept of no forms. Drift has been really suggesting that no forms are more effective. How does that actually work? How do you convert website traffic into qualified leads using a chat function?
So, man, there's so many things to unpack in there, which is number one, to me, it's actually not about replacing your forms with Drift. It's more about, I think the way that people buy has changed, which is I can find out anything about your company or your business without ever having to talk to anybody on your team, which has really changed the balance of power for demand gen people, where it used to be, ask. So there used to be an ask and then give. And so I'm going to ask for your email and then I'm going to give you all this free stuff, where now that doesn't work anymore because there's infinite supply in the market. And so even if you think that Drift or Prezi are the best products in their space, every potential buyer is skeptical, right? I'm skeptical. What does every sales rep that wants to sell me something tell me? They tell me that their thing is better, it's faster, it's easier to use, it's more cut. Everybody says that, right? And so even if that's true, I don't believe it. And so as a result, like, just the balance of power has changed from the seller to the buyer. And so like, we think of it like the form. If you just lock all of your content down because you want to generate leads from it, your conversion rate isn't going to be as high. And in reality of it is, I can just Google somebody else and then land on their website and I can get the free content, and information is free. And so I just want to get the answer. I don't really care who it comes from as a buyer. And we're also biased towards whatever shows up on Google anyway. And so we started to rethink, like, do you really need forms? Like, what if this could all happen inside of a bot, And I think the difference is, we used to talk about it as real-time conversations, but we realized it's actually one word, and that word is now. Everything is about now, where most traditional B2B marketing, like best-in-class B2B marketing, is built for later, which is like, get all these people to your website, have them fill out a form so someone on your team can be in touch later. But what happens in our personal lives after this webinar? If I go outside right now and I pull up the Lyft app on my phone and I call a Lyft, what are they going to do? They're going to connect me to the driver that is closest to me right now. It says, hey, Dave, we're scanning the area for the driver closest to you, and we're going to connect you now. And I'm like, and if it doesn't happen in 2 minutes, I'm like, all right, I'm going to try Uber now, and I try another app. Like, this is how we all behave in our real lives. But then something happens when we go to work, and I'm like, no, now I'm demand gen Dave, and I got to generate 500 leads this month, and so I got to lock everything down. And so we really thought hard about, like, how can we build a product that's going to fit in with how people want to buy today, and they want to have conversations. They're, especially in B2B, very few people are going to land on your website and be there for the first time. Be like, oh, what's Prezi or what's Drift? They're on your B2B website for a reason.
I'm going to spin this back to Nadja, because I think you're spot on, but it raises the bar for us as marketing and sales professionals. Nadja, how do we align the value proposition with the specific prospect's journey in this new now marketing environment?
Yeah, so I wanted to build on what Dave had just said, because I think as marketers, we have to think about how useful are we in that buyer's journey, right? At every point in time, like, Prezi is a highly visual product. So we think about what content is useful at different points. When I'm thinking about creating my next presentation, what are the tips I think about? When I think about inspiration, what are the other things out there that would kind of cause me to say, I want to create this versus this? More and more, at least in organizations such as ourselves, the connection between product and marketing, that barrier is going away. because we message real time. We say, you did this, try this. We say, hey, you haven't come back? Here's what's new. We try and get them in the moments when they're engaged. So I think the utility, that whole usefulness, marketing has to change from just spewing product offers to timing it exactly when they're most receptive to hearing or learning. You have to add value at every step, and I think that's a fundamental shift for a lot of us.
Such a good point. Like we think about this a lot, which is like, in marketing school, if there was such a thing, right, they would teach you that the funnel is 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Awareness, interest, desire. It's 4 steps: awareness, interest, desire, action, right? And so every demand gen system in the world is built to go awareness, interest, desire, action. And nobody knows what to do if somebody just comes up and says, hi, I'd like to buy now. I'll give you one real example. I had to buy something for Drift that we needed. It was expensive, $50,000 a year. I knew, very well-known thing in the B2B space, had to buy it, knew we needed it, didn't need a business, like just had to do it. And I showed up on their website and said, hey, I don't want to go through any of the sales process. I'm just ready to buy right now. And they said, actually, you got to fill this out and talk to a BDR. So then I said, fine. So I fill out the form. Then I talked to the BDR, who the BDR, poor guy was like, do you have the budget? He took me to the process, which is budget authority needs. I'm like, I own the budget. I'm telling you, I'm here. I'm ready to buy. Can I please just buy? He's like, hey, it sounds like you'd be a really good fit for that. I scheduled time with Chris next Thursday. He's the AE and you can talk to him. Yeah. Then I got to go do the call with the AE to then just basically replay me all my answers to the BDR. And only at the end of that process was I ready to buy. And like, we're all laughing and joking, but like, this is the best in class approach in B2B marketing. There's got to be a better way.
We have a line flow that kind of helps with that. So yes.
Let's talk about a multi-threaded conversation. Jeremy, would you mind dropping into that first topic? We're going to look at how Prezi allows you to really kind of open it up a little bit. Dave, what you suggested is kind of a unicorn. Many times there's multiple stakeholders, and we have to capture their attention. Nadja, looking back to that report, what is it about attention? How can we shape it to create a more interactive experience that leads to a further or deeper inquiry?
Yeah, so from an interactive, first of all, interactive is like a two-way conversation, right? That's what we're going to define that as. And when we think about it, there are multiple ways to have conversations today. There are tools, utilities, but I think in reality, what is interactive is being redefined, honestly. So attention being the new currency, we've learned a lot from our study that told us that not all presentations are created equal. There's different ways in the way your brain retains information. We knew in our research that 4 to 5 people shifted their attention away from the presenter that they last attended. And they also multitask. Huge amounts of multitasking is happening when people are trying to engage. So interactive presentations will help in terms of get people more engaged in the presentation, but there are elements that you need to have, and I think I mentioned before, visuals, compelling stories, a narrative to keep them engaged over time. What's super exciting about interactive conversations, I think, is the direction that where it's going. So today, you have this presentation, but where I think the human element comes in from the interactive side is we're looking at augmented reality, where your presentation is there with your face. So you don't have to be distracted. You're actually engaged. You're immersed in that story. So immersive is going to bring people into the stories even further. So I think interactive as a category is continuing to be defined. I mean, there's just the sort of the interactive, you can jump to the topics, but there's also going to be this element of bringing the human inside that immersive experience. Yeah, so I just want to highlight that because that's kind of a little more about where things are going, and not a lot of people are talking about that so far.
To your point, Nadja, and Dave's point also, don't put me in your preset lane. Don't put me in the BDR talk track. Don't put me in the AE talk track. Dave, I actually had a great Drift experience with someone using your product, and I had a real honest conversation with them in real time. And I think that's kind of the critical takeaway here, is that our sales process needs to be much more flexible and much more complex. Jeremy, let's go back to overview, please.
Wait, before you move on from that, can I just say something about that, which is, please. I think that's the thing that we need to educate people on, because what happens is people will say, yeah, but hold on. I'm going to have sales reps be on chat all day. And I'm like, yes, because those are the highest value conversations. If you had a brick and mortar store and somebody walked in, you wouldn't question whether or not you should have somebody greet them, right? You'd be like, no, that's a great experience. And so the shift that we have to help with the market is look, these are actually the highest value conversations you can have. And that's why we actually, we have this role now at Drift, and we're helping to hire it at other companies. We call it a conversation development rep, which is a take on the BDR, SDR, where they actually sit at the top of the funnel and are a concierge talking to everybody that's out there, because that's exactly it. Is people have to make this trade-off of, do I have somebody do it? Yeah, of course. That's the highest value thing you could spend your time on.
100%. That's brilliant. There's a nugget there for our audience. Conversation development rep. Let's talk about qualification. This is something that the top funnel reps are often involved in, and they use an outdated model. Let's say it's Bant or Medic or whatever. But we want to talk about how these conversations can do more than just check boxes. Dave, let's talk about this. What are some of the critical elements that you think these new reps need to do to qualify with conversations?
Yeah, I think I'm getting an echo from somebody. If anybody else minds muting, I think the biggest thing.
Hold on.
If you're not me, will you mute? Okay, that's better. So I think the thing that we look for when we talk about the conversation development rep is somebody who's basically digital native, or what, that's a silly word, like that's a jargony word for it, but like somebody who is, having high volume, like text message, WhatsApp message, Slack message, because you need those same conversational skills to be applied on chat. I think where we see a lot of people get stuck is, hello. Yes, how are you? Right? No, it's like the same way you would text a friend and have that conversation, but bring that into more of a business context on somebody's website. And so a big piece of that is looking for somebody who can have an intelligent conversation about your business and about your product, but do so over chat. And in reality, it becomes like you're having a text message conversation with somebody who's in your store, except you're sitting on the website and they're somewhere else.
Back in. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. And it's about a two-way conversation. I think that's what's missing. As Naja and I were talking about earlier, there's a lot of one-way monologues that end up creating a demo fatigue or sometimes a data ambush. We hear this a lot. And so there has to be a conversion. You guys are at the tip of this paradigm shift in terms of creating not only trust and insights, but also it's really critical to develop a needs analysis, in my opinion, because that's where you bring multiple stakeholders into the conversation, as opposed to the old dog and pony show when you have people kind of stuck in a room looking at an old, bullet point slides. So unless there's a further comment, Naja, about qualifying with conversations, we could move to the next point, which is about this needs analysis concept.
The only thing I would add is, again, we talked a little bit about selectivity. And so if your attention span is selective, it doesn't mean you don't have it. It means that you're choosing to engage. You need to grab people's attention while you're engaging them. So when you think about all the different scenarios you have, like we have a customer example of a Hollywood producer pitching his next TV show, and he's got a high stakes kind of presentation. But you have to create that storytelling paradigm around that. So it's a conversational storytelling. It's interactive, but yet you're still able to bring people along. It's about engagement. It's about attention. It's about kind of harnessing that. So I just want to kind of add that in terms of that two-way conversation. We have a lot of different kinds of examples around that. But I think conversational storytelling, in addition to some of these transactional things, are an important thing to put together.
Help me understand what it means to be a storyteller, because I consume stories, right? I watch movies, I read books, but then I go into a business meeting and I turn into a robot and I just stick to the script as if it's a crutch, and I'm terrified to let the buyers essentially drive the conversation.
Yeah, okay. So there is a level of confidence you need to have with your material, right? But it changes the whole dynamic between a salesperson and their prospect, right? Because you come across more credible, more persuasive, more confident. If you're able to adapt and answer, bring them on a journey. But then when they want to diverge and go there, and you can answer that question, you're building so much more confidence in that individual transaction. And I want to highlight that that transaction at that point, if you're having a conversation with somebody, that's after all the thousands of dollars you've spent to figure out who they are, where they are, what they're interested in, what that nurture flow was. You know, you're boom, 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 boom. And you get to that critical moment, that engagement opportunity, right? So you've got to get that right. The stakes are high because of so much that you've sunk in before that. So I wanted to just sort of say it's an important time. It's also part of making sure when you have your story and your narrative, right? Your brand, the way people buy is emotional. It's not just about facts and figures. You're kind of bringing them along. They've got to feel like what you're bringing is going to bring value to them, right? On a personal level, on a professional level, right? Stories and narratives connect you and your prospects and your customers to your brand.
Absolutely.
So narrative can be a customer narrative, can be your brand narrative, can be many different stories. It's not so hard to do when you know the building blocks to put together. We have a lot of material that talks about that if you'd like to learn more about that. But, you know, it's a lot of confidence, and it's also a lot of setting things up in your presentation so you can topically navigate very easily when they want to go into something. If they want to go from, you know, what are the use cases I could do it to which industries apply, being able to move very flexibly. You can't say, oh, okay, wait, I think that's slide 100. Give me a minute, I'm going to get there. That doesn't work anymore. So that's sort of that on-demand sort of responsiveness to people's interactions.
Some people call it situational awareness. Jeremy, let's go back to overview. And we're going to be buyers for a second. We're going to put on our buyer's hat. And we're going to talk about dynamic discovery. Nadja, to your point, let's talk about some of the critical milestones that buyers often need to meet as part of their decision-making process. This is where sales starts to really stumble. In my opinion, there's 4 things that need to be articulated, and it starts with a needs analysis, moves to a proof of concept, and then has success metrics. And I'm going to give you both a chance to share a real customer story here that kind of articulates that process. Nadja, we were talking earlier, you said you had a customer story, a Prezi experience, if you will. Could you talk a little bit about some of the success metrics that they were able to achieve using this more complex situational method of presenting?
Sure. We worked with a company in the construction business. Actually, what they did was concrete. So when you talk about concrete, you could talk about, okay, it's 10% of this composite, 20% this composite. But when they told their story, right, when they were talking with their prospects, they were actually working on a project with the Statue of Liberty, and it was the museum at the Statue of Liberty. They took their story from being just the concrete that was the building block for this museum to it being the footprint, it tying to the mission of the Statue of Liberty and the different kind of, it had a lot to do in terms of the footprint, the green footprint, how it sort of, all the missions coming together to sort of support the projects they were on. They completely transformed their story to be much more than just a provider of a certain component. It was like a whole very built out story that brought people along. Now, from a success metrics, the important thing here is because they were able to tell their story and also adapt to what their audience was asking. So they had a lot of questions about, does it do this or how does it fit here? They were able to condense down the whole cycle. So you kind of go from that initial meeting to discovery really fast because, there's this whole compression of the sales cycle. The more you can do there, the faster you can get to kind of the outcomes you're looking for. So that's just one example that sort of ties together how they represented themselves to get that emotional connection with their audience, but also how they were able to adapt to the actual process so they could kind of speed up that whole sales stage process.
Absolutely. Dave, I want to swing this back to you. Do you have a customer story that you can share that kind of speaks to one or more of these milestones that buyers need to meet before they can make a decision?
Needs analysis, proof of concept. I don't know. Can you ask it a different way? See if you can get me.
So I have to walk down the hall and get my boss to sign off on a new Drift implementation. And he's going to say, well, how do we know that it works? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we already have a marketing motion. We already have a sales motion. Why would I want to disrupt that? And I would say to him, well, in 90 days, we're going to be able to achieve X. But in order to get there, we're going to have to do Y and Z. So help me to explain to my boss using a story, like the customer at Drift achieved, 20% more conversions in half the time or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we have lots of stories like that are all up on the site, like drift.com/case studies. But I mean, I think of one that stood out. One that stands out to me is there's a company called Ipswich, and they generated basically $4 million of pipeline in 90 days. And the way that they did that by saying like, look, we tested this with a small number of reps. So instead of just rolling this out to everybody, we tested it with a small group. We proved out success with them, and then we expanded. And that's kind of been a consistent playbook that I would recommend to all potential customers, which is like, change takes time, and the way to guarantee you're going to fail with any new product is to say, congratulations, all 50 of you sales reps now have a license for X. Nobody's going to use that, no matter what it is. You have to always find the 2 or 3 reps who are like, I don't care what this is. I don't care if it breaks. I'm hungry. I'm scrappy. I want to try some new thing. And then they can become the champion, because, as many times as I can get up in front of the sales team and preach to them about, hey, we need your help doing X, Y, and Z, they're going to sit in there and be like, here he is again, trying to get me to do something else, right? You got to find somebody who really believes that. And so, even us writing case studies, like truly the best example is getting success inside of the organization with an individual person. And then that thing will start to spread like wildfire inside of the company.
100%. That's a brilliant example of using an internal champion to drive change, and then to have them socialize that change inside the prospect or customer organization as a tip of the spear.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen this time and time again, not just for our own product, but like we use there's a product that we use that records all of our sales calls, and we got that because a new person at Drift is like, this is his favorite product under the sun, and so he came in and was like a huge advocate for us changing what we already had and getting it. And guess what? He's really invested in this, and so he's teaching me how to use it, and other people how to use it, and everybody on the sales team how to use it. Just like that alone, you can't spend a marketing dollar in the world that's going to get you that type of thing, because that's real. It's somebody at the company who really feels this, and obviously none of that gets solved without a pain, right? There's a clear pain, and it's solving a problem, and then you have a champion. It should be easy selling from there.
Absolutely.
Can I build on that? Because we don't call them champions, we call them advocates, because these sort of advocate networks are what's incredibly viral. I agree. Someone sees success with it, and it's replicated really fast. And if they can share your assets, that's just even a faster way to kind of get that time value. So I just want to sort of +1 on the advocacy.
100%. Let's +1 it again, and I'll come back to you with this one, which is, I actually talked to our sales team a lot about this, because they're like, look, you're running the marketing team today. Like, why can't we get something on your budget? And I'm like, because actually I own the budget, but I actually don't own where we spend it. That all goes to the team. And I think that's a big fundamental shift in how most modern orgs are now set up, which is like, hey, here's the goal. I work with the finance team and whatever to set the budget, but then I go to each of the team leaders within marketing and say, we have this much money. It doesn't matter how you spend it. You have to come back and pitch how you're going to spend it. And so, I'll get a lot of questions from our sales team. Hey, I just was talking to this CMO and she said they have no budget for it. I'm like, well, or she said this is not her decision. Like, that's BS. I'm like, no, it's not. This is how more modern companies are now set up, where the people who actually have to do the day-to-day, like, I don't do any work. I'm just in meetings all day and on calls and whatever, right? Like, the people who are actually running the channels and doing the work, they should own the budget. They should buy their own tools. They should control their own stack. And that's what's happening. That's impacting more of the buying process today.
Can I build on that too? This is great, because this also triggered another thing for me, which is all about it, sort of a growth mindset and testing. Like, there are a lot of things that we think will work, and we test. In fact, we have one with Drift right now and trying to build out the premise of like where the value will be, because many of us have many different entry points into our products. We've got to figure out what those right interactions are for each of those things. A pricing page is different than a view page, for example. So I want to sort of build out this whole idea that, yes, we have a lot of decentralization. I agree. I'm in way too many meetings every day. But I'd say at the end of the day, what we don't know, we're willing to try and test. And that's the way we get to some of the answers, especially with a lot of different technologies that are evolving, to figure out if it's a good fit.
Yeah, the growth mindset, I think, is absolutely essential. It's so interesting when startups are asking others to change and transform, but find it difficult to do it themselves. And so thank you for acknowledging how we need to empower our leaders, all the way from directors to managers and even frontline, to make some decisions and then report back. At this point, I'd like to go back to the overview and also invite somebody from our audience who is well acquainted with both of your products. He's the CEO of a company called Pitch Kitchen, based out of New York City. Greg Rosner, would you mind just raising your hand? I think you've dialed in under my name, but we spoke briefly. You've also spoken with Nadja in Budapest not that long ago. Let's see if we can bring him in on the call here.
Sure. Hello, testing 1, 2. Okay.
Hey.
Hey, what's going on? Chris and Nadja, nice to meet you, Dave. Good to see you, Nadja. Great conversation you guys are having. Thanks for inviting me in.
You're welcome, Greg. You're on the front lines. You're talking to people who are changing their message every single day. And as Nadja and I were talking earlier, realize how difficult that can be, especially if you're stuck in kind of an outdated methodology or an outdated message. What are you seeing is helping people to convert from kind of a one-way monologue, data ambush, into more of a two-way, let them drive, open-ended conversation?
Yeah, no, it's actually starting with the problem. So Dave, for you, for example, like if you just talk to people, say, Dave, what does your company do? You can go on and I'm sure some of your sales reps, not your A players, are saying, oh, it's this fantastic solution that goes on your website and chats with prospective customers, and it's seamless, it's awesome. But most customers, they hear that kind of stuff and they're like, huh? What? I don't really give a shit about that. So the best way to look at your story, and we talk a lot about story here in the messaging, is to start with the problem. So most customers, most people go to websites and they have no idea how to buy or how to start a conversation or how, and most businesses are losing a ton of business because they're losing that power of now interaction. And then you move right into what drift is, for example, to solve that problem. It's like the Grinch who stole Christmas. I mean, who cares about, a story where it was just like Whoville with this awesome little village with, what was that little girl's name in Whoville? In the Grinch. Yeah, Linda, right. So the fact is, if it was just a story about that little awesome child in Whoville, nobody cares. But all of a sudden, people love the story of the Grinch because it starts with the problem.
Absolutely. Jeremy, drive us into the change stories topic. I think it's important that we understand that the B2B stories are about change. And that they're about real problems and real people. A lot of times the people in our stories are just titles. They're just the head of sales or head of marketing. Greg, how do you really cast a light and humanize the people in some of the stories that you're developing?
Yeah, so you say, it's not hard because we're all humans. So I'm not sure about what you mean by humanize.
Like a case study typically is really oriented around a solution and some success. Yeah. But the people in the case study could be John and Jane Doe. Like there's no real character there in the story. And yet we know, Nadja, from looking at storytelling and the mental images that we build in our minds, that we have to identify with real people. Right. That's difficult.
For you. All right. So thousands of years ago, and even today, we're all wired for great stories. And every story has a hero. Okay. But most businesses get this wrong, because they place their solution as the hero of the story. And I'm sure a couple of your sales reps do this, Dave, too. It's just a natural thing. We want to be heroes of our jobs, of our businesses, and we place ourselves as the hero of the story, but we're not. Our customers are the hero because they're the characters in the story that need to change the most, from what they're doing today to what they'd like to do. They're the ones that have a goal and a vision of what they want to accomplish. So it's very simple. The mindset is to create a story where your customers are the hero and you are helping them as a guide, as Obi-Wan, what's the in Harry Potter, the old guy with the what's his name? Right, him.
The wizard.
The wizard.
Dumbledore.
Yeah. So you are Dumbledore. You're Yoda. That's your job, is to help the hero accomplish their goals.
Okay, I'm going to jump in, Greg. I want to run this by Dave real quick. Dave, you're doing this. You're on calls every day. What is hard about being the guide? What is difficult for you to embrace that role?
I don't know. I don't think it's that difficult. I think you just have to frame. I think we're just caught in this mindset of like, great, you took my call. Let me tell you, like, that's how everybody starts, right? Where I think the simple change to starting those calls is, look, everybody's really damn busy today and people don't even want to get on the phone. So why did you take 30 minutes out of your day to get a sales demo from me? Like, if I was a rep, that's how I would start every call, because I don't ever get on calls. And I know most other people don't ever. I hate when someone, hey, do you have 5 minutes to hop on a call? No, definitely not. And so, and especially no one's proactively seeking out a sales demo, because by the old definition, I'm going to be sold to. And then if I don't end up buying them, they're going to follow up with me forever. And so I think it's just like, just the power has changed. And so before I even said anything, I would say, well, what do you want to hear? Now, that's different than, I think, if it's a website or if it's a piece of content, that I don't control like how somebody got there. And so I think it's important to start with a story. And there's a really simple framework that Steve Jobs used that I just steal for everything that I do now, which is, this is how I write every deck, every landing page, every blog post. It's tell a story, then pose a problem, then state the solution, show examples, and then have a call to action. I think it's so important to start with a story, because I agree with the problem part. But if you don't start with a story, then that's just like a stranger coming up on the street and be like, you have a problem, let me tell you why. A story is the hook that's going to get you to listen to me. So I think that's important in the context. But in the context of a sales call, like we bought a new product and I got an onboarding call the other day, and the CSM, the customer success person, just clearly had a script and was going to walk me through that script no matter what I said. And I said, look, I'm already very familiar with this thing. Can you just show me how this thing works? Right. And so that's how we now coach our reps to start a lot of the demos, which is like, there's a lot I could tell you. What do you actually want to talk about? And if they say, I kind of just want the overview, then it's like, great, here's why Drift exists. Here's the problem. But if they say, look, I listen to your podcast. I'm a super fan. I went to your event, but I just want to know, will I be able to track this if I integrate with Salesforce? Because then the rep just basically narrowed down what would have gotten all over the place to that one very specific thing.
Absolutely. Naja, swing this up to you. What does an open-ended question at the beginning of a call or a meeting do for our attention?
Right away that says you're sort of respecting the investment they've made with their time. They have a set of questions they want to ask. You start with them first. You help them drive. You help get them to the points and then the answers they need quickly. So if we're going back to brevity, getting to them as fast as possible, getting them the content they want as fast as possible, and tying it to something meaningful, a story. I think the story, I agree, is super important, because that's how you're connecting on that emotional level. I think, let's not forget, people buy because they believe it's going to do something for them. We're not just pitching just on the pain alone. It's the story. It's how it all comes together for them. So
absolutely. I buy for the people as much as for the product. I have to trust the people that I'm working with to deploy the solution. Jeremy, let's go back to overview. Then we'll take this home with this engagement model that I think will be helpful for our audience and maybe for our panelists as well. It's the last topic. We've got about 5 minutes. Is everybody good on time? So I'm a new rep. I just came to work at Drift, but I don't know where the stories are, Dave. How do I start to find them? How do you start to create a culture of storytelling inside your organization?
This is the greatest mystery on earth, is how do you help sales reps find stuff that they need? Because do we have a case study on X? Yes, I just gave you 10 of them. It's always going to be an issue. We're giving every sales rep a physical binder just to get rid of all that. And so for us, we think, look, I think sales reps are also, as marketers, we drown them in information. Use this, use this, use this. What do you mean you don't know where that is? So I don't blame them. And so we just try to keep it simple and have a couple case studies for each different use case, and then one really clean centralized deck that's, here's our story. But actually what we're starting to do is surface this back up to the website and say, it's kind of silly to have like content that the reps like demo with that's a deck, but then it's not publicly available on the website. Like, we think that our website should be the best salesperson and have all the content there. And so we're focusing on creating basically, and you'll see this, our best reps actually just demo off of the Drift website, which is great because that means our website is serving two purposes. Number one, it's a sales deck. Number two, it's our website.
Fantastic. I love that. Greg, let me swing this back to you. How do we create aha moments that are memorable inside our stories?
So I think the people believe the things that they themselves decide, not the things that you tell them. So you could tell things to people till you're blue in the face, but they won't believe you. So then getting back to what Dave was saying, asking really good questions and maybe using your website as your sales deck for a lot of it is great because it's very now, power of now, it's very conversational. But I think my biggest, my favorite question is, what is most important to you about this? And that question usually cuts through pretty much everything.
Absolutely. These aha moments are transferable. They're like currency. We walk down the hall and we share them with our colleagues. What if it's a very technical product? What if there is a lot of complex data? How do we associate a data moment with an aha moment?
So a couple of different ways. When we think about the structure, if it's data, if you're representing the information about a complex product, maybe there's really visual ways that you can represent what that product is going to do for you. There's data storytelling that kind of goes with the overarching arc of what that story is. I'm trying to think of other things around that. If it's we have customers that basically took complex, almost a catalog of their product and put that in a Prezi. Now, the interesting thing was for their salespeople, they had to navigate easily from an attachment that did this to a combine that did that. So you have to have all the different paths sort of easily accessible so they don't get stuck in sort of a serial fashion, forced march, if you will, by the rep themselves. We think a lot in terms of speed to aha, because the more visual examples you can use. But I'm going to add one more dimension to this, which you didn't mention, but I do think is an important thing. There's a lot of self-navigation that happens, whether you embed something on your website or whether and when you share a presentation, we think of it all as a full life cycle. So we want to know what happens 10 minutes after you left the room. So even when you send it, what did people do? Where did they spend time? How did they sort of consume the information? It helps you because you know not only what's important, but you can improve that presentation time and time again. Like if most of your prospects never get past a certain point, either the navigation's not great, or maybe that topic isn't as important and you need to really focus on another. So I think you got to think of things as like informing at every point in the way to kind of continue to improve what you do. So I just wanted to add that.
Absolutely. Jeremy, let's go back to overview and then we'll bring this home. I think we all know that we live in a hyperlinked market and that things are not linear. And that the more that we can embrace our buyer and the questions that they have and start to answer those questions as opposed to giving them our forced pitch, then we're going to be able to engage and create a more dynamic discovery. We're going to just kind of go from bottom to top here. Greg, what are some final points and how can we find you online? What's one key takeaway that you'd like to share with our audience?
So I love what Dave said earlier, is this power of now. I mean, now, this is what people want when they want it. And if you start your presentation or start your conversation with your interest, what's most important to you is what is most important to your audience. That's what's most important. Not that you got to get through your presentation or you got to pitch them slide 12 or whatever your buying process, your selling process is not as important as the interest of your customer.
100%. Start where they want to start. How can we find you online, Greg?
So pitchkitchen.com. It's our agency. We're based in New York. And guess what? It's snowing in New York today.
So it's coming. It's on its way. It's on its way here.
Dave, what's a key takeaway you want our audience to recall? How can we find you online?
Well, I want them to know that. That's it. No, a key. I want them to know how to follow me online. I'm at Dave Gerhardt everywhere. Key takeaway for me is just think about how you buy, and take your marketing hat off and be like regular person who goes home at night and does whatever, right? Like, and think about, and just start to observe how you buy and interact, and then think about what are the things that happen in your sales process that you wouldn't do if you were a consumer, and how can you adapt to be more like that?
100%. If you're a seller, go buy software. You know, once you start buying, you'll start to feel what it's like to be a buyer. Dave, I can't thank you enough for joining. You share a lot of just depth and wisdom, seeking wisdom. I look forward to following you on the podcast and a lot more. Nadja, help us to articulate next steps for a PowerPoint constrained community inside a marketing organization that wants to really spread their wings and be much more dynamic in their discovery. What would you recommend?
Yeah, I would say there's 500 million stories trapped in PowerPoint. We have to let them free. So in terms of it, I think that we have to be respectful of the audience. You know, attention spans are evolving. People are inundated with content and tech that doesn't really engage them. And with their time being more valuable, and things that stick have to be personal, customized, and meaningful. So be really mindful of what your audience wants. And if you want to follow me, I'm a Najc on Twitter, or Nadja Gausi at Prezi.com. And also I have a monthly article on entrepreneur.com and try to give some helpful tips every month as well.
We are all part of a storytelling category. One of the places that category is starting to bloom is inside the community at Sailstack.io. And we're going to repurpose this content. We're going to send it out to our community of 1,500 B2B marketing and sales leaders and start to make story a central part of the conversation. I can't thank you all enough for joining with us here today. This content will continue to grow. It will continue to amplify your message, continue to lead the way. All three of you, thank you so very much. My name is Chris Ortolano, Sailstack.io, at SalesNerdo on Twitter. Have a lovely rest of your afternoon and evening, everybody, and talk to you online soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.